This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
The main power plant in Gaza resumed operations after receiving the first shipment of fuel from Israel via Al-Mintar or Karni border crossing.
However, Israel continues to suspend supplies of diesel and other petroleum products to the Gaza Strip, and also continues to close down all border crossings to humanitarian aid.
Once again, the Gaza power plant resumed operations after receiving the first shipment of fuel. However, as usual, the power plant received fuel at the minimum level, which is not sufficient enough to allow it to operate at full capacity. Although Israel allowed limited supplies of cooking oil and gas to the Gaza Strip, it continues to suspend the shipment of diesel there.
اليوم حيدخل إن شاء الله 700 متر مكعب وهذا يكفي للمحطة لمدة يومين فقط.
Today, God willing, we will receive nearly 700 cubic meters of fuel, which is enough to keep the power plant running for only 2 days. God willing, we will receive more shipments tomorrow and Friday. If the shipments do not arrive, the crisis will return to the Gaza Strip. As you know, we do not have fuel reserves in our power plant.
في مخازن محطة التوليد.
With the arrival of these limited fuel shipments, the electricity problem in Gaza may be temporarily and partially resolved. In the meantime, Israel continues to impose its blockade on the Gaza Strip. In addition, Israel continues to impose strict security measures at all border crossings in Gaza, not allowing the citizens to travel freely and also banning all humanitarian aid, including essential goods, from entering into the Gaza Strip.
When talking about the power of the occupier versus the power of the civilians, the occupier doesn't have the absolute power. The occupier is governed by international principles and laws. These laws also control the practices of the occupier as well as protected the rights of the civilians. The occupier must provide humanitarian aid, including all essential goods to the civilians, as well as ease travel restrictions in the occupied territories. What Israel is doing is an organized violation of international law, which in many occasions has elevated to a war crime level.
This ongoing Israeli blockade imposed on the Gaza Strip for more than 2 years has indeed exhausted the Palestinian public. The humanitarian situation has indeed turned to the worse after Israel issued a resolution nearly 5 months ago considering the Gaza Strip a hostile entity. Meanwhile, Gaza has run out of essential goods and work has also slowed down in the humanitarian sector.
They are dealing with the Gaza Strip as if it was a terrorist entity. What did the Gaza Strip do? They are not fighting Hamas or Fatah. They are fighting the entire Palestinian people. Nearly 1.5 million people are suffering in the Gaza Strip due to the blockade. What crime did the Gaza Strip commit to deserve this?
Amidst the humanitarian efforts aimed at lifting the blockade imposed on the Gaza Strip, Israel agreed reluctantly to resume partial fuel supplies there. Meanwhile, Gaza residents are wondering what does it take to get the ban lifted completely, thus allowing them to return to their normal life. Hijab, Al Jazeera, Gaza, Palestine.
At the Rafah border, crossing with Egypt, and without using force, the Egyptian security forces have ordered 30 Palestinian ambulances carrying 30 patients, with nearly 200 protesters on foot, to return to the Palestinian side of Rafah. This news comes after the protesters stormed into the Egyptian side of Rafah. In addition, 30 Palestinian women were taken into Egyptian custody after breaking down one of the gates at the Rafah border crossing and refusing to return to the Palestinian side of Rafah. The women took part in a protest demanding Israel allow wounded Palestinians to enter into Egypt.
Meanwhile, at the Eretz border crossing in Beit Hanun in the northern Gaza Strip, the Israeli police attacked Palestinian protesters from the 1948 territories. The protesters called for the lifting of the blockade and allowing humanitarian aid to enter into the Gaza Strip. In addition, a verbal altercation ensued by the Arab protesters and dozens of Jews from the right wing. Moreover, Israeli Knesset member Avi Itan, a Jewish leader from the right wing, lashed out at Arab cabinet members who took part in the demonstration. Nearly 200 Arabs from the 1948 territories took part in today's protest.
Back now to the controversy raging in Israel and around the world over the blockade of Gaza and today's decision by Defense Minister Barak to restore, albeit temporarily, the supply of fuel and other essential goods to Gaza. Hirsch Goodman is the director of a program on information strategy at the Institute for National Security Studies. Thank you so much, Hirsch, for being our guest today.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about information strategy. It didn't take long for the government to back down from its tough line on the supply of fuel to Gaza in the wake of overwhelming international pressure. How would you rate the government's decision-making process from the point of view of information strategy?
Look, I think it's very difficult to explain to the world that hospitals with no electricity are a good thing. But it's amazing how the narrative has been changed from Israel being zapped with 150 rockets on one day to the poor Palestinian punished population of Gaza the next.
Although the narrative was never the poor Israelis being pounded by Qassam rockets. Somehow that story never got through to the world media.
I don't agree with you. I saw it in the front page I saw it in definitely it was covered by the international press over Thursday and Friday when it really got bad. Right. And the New York Times was there and others were there. It was covered, but forgotten. And the whole world now has sort of forgotten that Israel is retaliating for hundreds of rockets over a period of 7 years that has terrorized a huge population for a sustained period of time where people can't even plow their fields in peace. And then all that's been forgotten, and the whole world is refocused on the freezing children, the women with candles, and I can tell you that Hezbollah and Hamas and the Iranians are very, very good at this. They understand the pressure that's going to be created in Jordan. They understand the pressure that's going to be created in Egypt with the pictures coming over Al Jazeera. And frankly, I don't think we've really thought about when we're making policy like this, I'm not sure they really thought out all the consequences of how it would play.
You're saying that given the coverage by the world media, which might have been anticipated, it was a mistake to even attempt the blockade? Is that what you're saying?
I don't say that because the number of rockets has gone down dramatically, and I think the people of Gaza understand fully what the consequences of continued rocket attacks will be. And I think this was actually, to a certain degree, an intelligent thing to have done because it's non-violent. Okay.
It seems that way to us, but that's not the way it's being perceived by the world.
Well, because when we make policy, we do not have somebody sitting next to the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister saying, wait, how is this going to play out? And if they factored media considerations while they're making policy, they wouldn't need to clean up the mess with Hezbollah after the fact. And I think this has been a consistent thing. I think it's time that we learned this very basic primary lesson. You have an Attorney General giving the government legal advice. You have a Chief of Staff giving them security advice. You need somebody at that level to give the government advice on how to make its policy, factoring 24-hour, full-time, intrusive media into their policy making.
Gaza, which experienced a pitch-black night last evening as a result of a shortage of fuel and a power outage, mourned 2 martyrs from the Mujahideen brigades affiliated with the Fatah movement. Meanwhile, the commander of the brigades, As'ad Abu Sharia, was severely wounded in an airstrike in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood.
Israeli airstrikes and land incursions continue to cause bloodshed among the Palestinians. The Gaza Strip is constantly under attack. Ibrahim al-Ghouti from the Fatah-affiliated Mujahideen brigades was martyred in an Israeli strike. The commander of the brigades, As'ad Abu Sharia, was severely wounded. Meanwhile, in northern Gaza, Palestinians held a mourning procession for Imam Ahmad from the same brigades. Many Palestinians are wounded in consecutive Israeli airstrikes. Meanwhile, the Israeli forces arrested 40 Palestinians before ending its incursion in Rafah in southern Gaza.
For certain, the international community is responsible for this, and mainly the criminal American administration, which gave the green light to the Zionist enemy to shed our blood, kill, and sacrifice our lives. Also, there is unjustified Arab silence, and they are also responsible.
As the ongoing siege is tightened, the crisis for the healthy and sick residents worsen due to the lack of fuel and power outages. This deprives the residents from water and has stopped the sewage system from working, which threatens Palestinians with many environmental and humanitarian catastrophes.
The current situation in the Gaza Strip is at the least a catastrophe in all of its meanings. The situation now cannot be politically explained. The situation is very dangerous and very serious. We are talking about the situation of 1.5 million people who are not only living under tight siege, but who are also prevented from the basic necessities of life. Thus, we are sentencing more than 1.5 million people to a real death if the situation continues.
The most dangerous implications of the siege and the lack of fuel and electricity is that it has affected thousands of sick people who have headed to the Rafah crossing, which divides Palestine from Egypt. Palestinians are calling for Egypt to intervene to stop the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The situation in the hospitals there, which are working at half capacity to treat the wounded people of the Israeli military aggressions, is very dangerous and difficult.
Our capabilities are being depleted from the test tubes to respirators. This is because of the lack of electricity. We are very nervous because these sick people need artificial respirators. So when the electricity was cut off to these machines, it leads to the deaths of many of our patients.
Israeli planes and internationally banned weapons kill Palestinians in a bloody series of events that do not stop. As the siege is tightened, Palestinians are being subjected to the most horrible collective punishment, putting hundreds, rather thousands of Palestinians in danger. Mustafa Abdelhadi, Al-Alam, Jabalia refugee camp, northern Gaza Strip, Palestine.
أهلا بكم مجددا. نفت دمشق ما ذكرته وسائل إعلام لبنانية أن سوريا منعت ابتداء.
Damascus has denied reports by the Lebanese media that starting from 6 p.m. last night, the Syrian government prevented food goods from entering Lebanon. The Lebanese An-Nahar newspaper reported that Syria decided suddenly to impose an agricultural siege on the borders with Lebanon and indicated that it obtained this information from official Lebanese sources. They confirmed that the Syrian customs implemented a decision that prevents travelers, trucks, and cars from bringing food products into Lebanon by land. In Beirut, the political situation has escalated between the opposition and ruling majority. Clashes broke out between demonstrators and the security forces after some streets were shut down to protest over the cutting off of electricity.
The political crisis in Lebanon continues to flare without any signs that a solution is near. This is how Lebanese citizens describe the statements by politicians. Every side holds the other side responsible for the political crisis. Such statements, mainly made by parliamentarians, accuse the opposition of working to change the regime in Lebanon.
This is the demand of the Lebanese opposition. They want to change the regime in Lebanon. We consider this a coup on the Taif Agreement, a coup on the Constitution, and a coup on the National Charter, thus rearranging the country in an unknown way and throwing it into the unknown.
The opposition denied these accusations, saying that what needs to be changed is the paralysis in the government, which has been brought on by the ruling majority.
No, we are calling for resolving the government crisis. Today, the government crisis is being caused by problems that need to be corrected. These problems are not only being caused by loopholes in the Constitution, they are also being caused by the policies of the ruling majority, which is dominating how the Taif Agreement is implemented, which is wrong and violates the Constitution.
Meanwhile, many young men burned tires to block off the Salim Salam Street in central Beirut to protest the cutting off of electricity in their neighborhoods. This resulted in riots that required the intervention of the Lebanese army, which reopened the street and dispersed the demonstrators. Furthermore, the sound of explosions is not strange in Beirut, where a car bomb exploded at a car parking area in the Mosaic area, damaging many cars, including the car of the wife of the military prosecutor Ahmed Awidat. The series of events culminated in news that France is renewing efforts to revive communication between international and Arab capitals in order to return dialogue, especially between Damascus and Beirut, in order to resolve the Lebanese crisis. Hussein Shihada, Al-Arabiya.
لحل الأزمة اللبنانية. حسين شحادي، العربية.
Increasing freedoms and encouraging dialogue has improved the university's environment in Sudan. However, violence among students have been a continuously growing phenomena in spite of these improvements. This requires serious examination and a search for solutions that will address the sources of the problem.
The phenomenon of violence amongst university students goes back to the 60s, with many such incidences recorded in history. Many observers see this phenomenon as unusual, since it is occurring at a time when the university's environments are witnessing noticeable improvements, due to many organizations attending to the students' needs and expanding the capacity at most departments. However, the phenomenon has been growing lately, raising concerns about implications. Violent incidences at some universities reached the extent of deaths. In other incidences, the authorities found some hand grenades and other weapons like knives and such among the students. Violence was done in an organized manner, with destruction and burning as some of the examples. This in turn has had a negative effect on the educational system by disrupting the educational course.
لينعكس ذلك من بعد على العملية التعليمية وتعطيل مسار الدراسة.
This is an extremely negative phenomenon because it threatens the safety and security in a country trying to instill peace and encourage the principles of national unity. Some observers find it surprising that this phenomenon is spreading amongst universities, as this segment of society is supposed to be aware and open-minded. Others, however, see it as a grim reflection of the political reality outside the university walls. Is promoting dialogue amongst students and expanding their literary knowledge sufficient to root out the source of this phenomenon?
في تعزيز الحوار الطلابي وأدبياته لتجفيف منابع هذه الظاهرة.
Once again, the debate over hijab, the Islamic headscarf or cover, has returned to the political spotlight in Turkey. The issue stirred a controversy between the ruling Islamic Development and Justice Party on one side and the secular parties on the other. Meanwhile, the Turkish parliament is preparing to vote on the country's new constitution, which includes an article calling for the lifting of the hijab ban. Once the issue of the hijab goes before the parliament, it will be voted on in a general referendum.
At the end of 2001, and after the Development and Justice Party ascended to power in Turkey, many supporters of the ruling party urged their leaders to bring the issue of the hijab back to the spotlight. However, since then, the Justice Party has failed to meet the expectations of its supporters, especially among women who wear the hijab and their families. Now that Tayyip Erdogan and his followers stood their ground after their landslide victory in the 2007 legislative elections, the issue of the hijab began to return to the spotlight. Along with the security developments in northern Iraq, the hijab has become an important issue in Turkish politics. Meanwhile, Erdogan said that it was time to completely lift the ban on the hijab because the problem is affecting a large segment of the population.
My dear brothers and sisters, I would like to say that no one in this country has the right to intrude on the freedoms and traditions of our people, including the way they choose to dress.
These remarks by Erdogan have stirred fear and concern among Turkish secular parties, which consider themselves the saviors of the Republic of Atatürk. In addition, many secular leaders called on the Turkish Attorney General to issue a declaration against any attempts to change the secular outlook of the Republic of Turkey. Meanwhile, the ruling Development and Justice Party managed to win the support of the National Movement Party regarding the issue of the hijab, which is expected to go before the parliament for voting. With this, the ruling party is expected to enter the next round of political debates with more momentum than if they were to go alone.
We, the National Movement Party, are trying to help the Turkish parliament resolve the issue of hijab based on the legal system and the constitution. Wearing the hijab is an individual's freedom of choice mandated by law.
The issue of the hijab has stirred another controversy in the country, where some secular leaders started to lobby for the closure of all political offices affiliated with either the Development and Justice Party or the National Movement Party. This news comes after the District Attorney of the Republic started to gather collaborative evidence against the two parties, which have made numerous announcements on the issue of the hijab. After gathering the evidence, the District Attorney of the Republic is expected to file a complaint with the Constitutional Court of the Justice against the Turkish ruling party and the National Movement in an attempt to close down their political offices. It seems that the Development and Justice Party is posing a threat to this long-standing secular citadel of Atatürk. The ban on political parties or the closure of their affiliated offices is not a new practice in Turkey. The hijab is an old political battle which may help to bring changes in this Muslim but secular country.
Now, in a country where violence is commonplace, it represents an oasis of calm. But peace in the Afghan province of Khost remains tentative at best. Seen as strategically crucial, it's eyed enviously by the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And this week, Al Jazeera brings you a special series of reports from the region. Well, Khost lies in southeastern Afghanistan, bordering Pakistan on the east. Just across the border is Waziristan, said to be a major stronghold of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. It was a key stronghold of the Mujahideen during the Afghan war. The CIA even helped build a military facility in Khost for the warlords, but it was later used by Osama bin Laden for training Al-Qaeda recruits. Khost was also a base for the Taliban during their rule. It gave them a major supply route to Kabul. If Khost falls into Taliban hands again and became another front line, it would be a major setback to government forces and their international allies. In the first of her reports, Zaina Khodr looks at Khost's fragile peace and the man trying to hold that peace together.
This man has already survived 5 assassination attempts by the Taliban, and every time he leaves his well-guarded home, he still faces a risk. Arsala Jamal is the governor of Khost province. He is also a target. Nowadays, he heads to work in a heavily armed convoy. The governor, however, tells us he is not fazed.
I did not reduce my travels around. I continue to travel because this is my job. I have continued to visit communities, different districts.
Jamal insists to personally inaugurate a $1.5 million power grid, the latest development project in this war-torn province that will provide the people with electricity. The governor promises them more, but he asks something in return: to stand by the government in its fight against those who oppose it. Not too long ago, suicide attacks and bombings were common in Khost. Not any longer. Afghan forces and U.S. troops maintain the peace in this province, which lies just a few kilometers from the Pakistan border. For the Taliban, control of this area would be strategic. That is why coalition and Afghan forces want to keep them at bay. Khost lies strategically on the border, just across from the Taliban stronghold of Waziristan in northern Pakistan. Control of Khost means control of the trade routes between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Local support is vital in preventing the return of the Taliban. Most people in this province will tell you they are the ones keeping the peace.
We are happy with the security, but we want electricity, hospital, schools. And if the government doesn't deliver, people might support the Taliban.
If the government doesn't win heart of people, which they are not doing now, it will be dangerous. The US wouldn't be able to control this area without our backing.
Improved security brings in more investment. More money means roads can be paved and people can rebuild their lives.
The enemy is trying their best. They are also putting a lot of focus on this area. I hope the central government and the international community understands the importance of Khost, and I do believe they are understanding that one. If no more resource comes, people will become indifferent.
The fragile peace may offer the younger generation the chance to start anew. Some are feeling the change. For now, the main challenge facing the authorities is to separate those who will help secure the province's future from those who will harm it. Zaina Khudr, Al Jazeera, Khost, southeastern Afghanistan.
The fourth stop in the primary elections was transformed into an unprecedented, brutal battlefield. The confrontation took place during the last televised debate between the Democratic candidates in South Carolina before the primary elections, which will take place on Saturday. This confrontation was mainly between Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in these critical debates that will determine their future. We leave you with Muna Abu Diab.
Under this Confederate flag, large crowds gathered to commemorate the birthday of the civil rights champion Martin Luther King Jr. Here also, the two competing Democratic presidential candidates started their confrontation, which was shaped by the political environment in South Carolina and the fact that 50% of its population is African American.
We can no longer offer to build ourselves up by tearing each other down. We can no longer afford to traffic in lies, fear, or hate. We don't need policies of fear.
Let us just take a moment to marvel the progress that we have made together. That we stand here is a measure of Dr. King's life work and his legacy.
She was referring to King's speech, which he delivered 40 years ago.
I have a dream.
He said that he has a dream to see the American nation comprised of all races living in equality. It seems that these rights are still a sensitive issue in America's domestic politics. Obama spoke about these rights only hours before he entered the debate with his competitor. He called for destroying the walls that separate the American society and accused Hillary Clinton and her husband of using these same walls against him by misrepresenting his statements and defaming him.
Well, I'm here. He's not.
Okay, well, I can't tell who I'm running against sometimes.
The debate continued over personal issues, economic affairs, and the war in Iraq. They exchanged fiery accusations.
It is very difficult having a straight-up debate with you because you never take responsibility for any vote, and that has been a pattern. In the Illinois State Senate, Senator Obama voted 130 times present. That's not yes, that's not no, that's maybe.
The third presidential candidate, John Edwards, cooled off the debate a little bit. He tried to show that he is still present, although it is clear that the competition is only between two.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic Video Podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.